everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the owner of Oakland's Eisner Award-winning comic shop, Cape and Cowl Comics. It's Eitan Manhoff. Thanks for coming on, Eitan.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
How exciting is it to hear Eisner Award-winning in front of your shop's name?
Oh, my God. Best feeling ever. Really was like such a wonderful surprise. I really, truly didn't know that this was going to happen, that it was going to be our year. And it was like this like wave of relief and joy and surprise and excitement. It was like all the best feelings raining upon me all at once.
How many times had you been nominated before?
This is our fourth time as a finalist.
Okay.
Fourth time in the final five, or this year it was 6.
Did you go to San Diego each time?
Yes.
Oh, boy.
Sure did. And a couple of those I think 3 out of 4. This year, so they put all of the nominees at a table together for dinner and to watch the award show. And this year, 5 of the 6 stores were all there, and we had a wonderful time hanging out and everything. The previous 3 times, it was me and the winning store.
Oh my God. Oh, that's rough. That's rough. You filmed a video from up on stage as you're accepting, right?
I did. Yeah.
I wonder if you're the first.
Yeah, I have no idea. I was like a little bit of an out of body experience. I got up there. There was 4 things I wanted to do. I didn't prepare a speech because, again, I didn't know it was coming. Also, I've been there on the losing side a number of times. And so I thought, if it happens, I'm going to wing it. And there was 4 things I wanted to say. I wanted to thank my parents. I wanted to thank my family, my wife and my kids. I wanted to thank my staff. And I wanted to thank the other retailers, the nominees. And I got 2 out of 4. Completely forgot my parents, even though my dad was my date to the show. And I forgot to thank the other nominees. But I got up there and I'm just I think I'm kind of rambling, and I said something to the effect of like, I love being there in the room with all these, wonderful comics people, but I kind of wish I was at home at my daughter's softball tournament, sitting in the heat and making awkward conversation with other parents and trying to keep the 7-year-old in the bleachers to watch the game. And I was just like, hey, y'all want to do something? Want to do something weird? If I did get my phone, would you all wish my daughter good luck in her softball games tomorrow? And people were like, yeah. So I whipped out the phone and I recorded the video, and on the count of 3, everybody said, good luck, Parker. And thank God everybody did it, because it would have been like the most awkward thing in Eisner Award history, which is really saying something.
Yeah.
So it was great.
I don't think anyone really knows the etiquette of that. It's funny, like seeing in advance of it, people are always like, what am I supposed to wear? Like, what am I supposed to do there? Like, what's the right thing to do? And it's just like, I don't know. I think it's comics. Just do whatever feels right.
So true.
I think that's really great. I think if let's say I won an award, I would probably just go up there and cry the entire time. So you did much better than I did. 2 out of 4 is much better than just openly weeping as you're accepting the award. But
I really thought I might. I mean, I'm an emotional guy. I really expected the tears to flow, but I was really too nervous and too unprepared to even cry.
That's the secret. I did want to ask about the video. Like, I saw Heidi McDonald say that the videos each retailer made for the nominations were spectacular. She went to the panel, I think, that the finalists were on beforehand. What did you have to do in the process of getting nominated? Was it just like creating the video, or was it something more?
Yeah, so there's the video. So it's a 5-minute video, and it's basically a shop tour. This is how we do it and why. And then on top of that, there's this packet of information that they ask for, very specific information that they would like to know about your store, your layout, your community involvement, just kind of everything about your shop. And it's a big project. And actually, I approached it very differently this year than I had before. In previous years, I think my packet I sent in was like 6 or 8 pages long. It was like, here's a couple pictures of the shop. Hope you like it. And then last year's winner, Katie Pride, the great Katie Pride of Books with Pictures in Portland, she shared her winning packet with our Comics Pro group. And I read through it, and it was like 80 pages long. And I was like, oh my God, I completely misunderstood the assignment. I did not know that we were doing dissertations on our store. I thought it was something else entirely. So I really approached it differently, really dug into the details, really lots of photo documentation. So it's a project to get all the way to the end of this.
Mm-hmm. I watched the video that's on your website, your Eisner nomination video. I presume that was from last year?
On the website?
Yeah, I think it's an Eisner nomination video. It's you walking into the store, and it's kind of got the, oh, hello there, I didn't see you there type vibe. And you walk in, and then you give everyone a tour. I assume that was the Eisner nomination video.
It could be. Listen, we've got a handful of these. This was, now we get to take a break, but for a while we were doing them fairly often.
Were you improvising, or are they all scripted out?
They're fairly scripted. This one actually, so my friend Dan came to help me make the video. He does video stuff for, he does it professionally. So he came and helped me do it. We still did it on a cell phone and everything, but having him kind of throw it all together was really nice. And he came from out of town to do it. And we had one day to make the video. And we had like 6 hours in the day to actually film. And we spent 4 hours of the day recording the first like minute of footage. And then we went for like a long lunch, like a 3 martini lunch or something. And came back. We were like, we have an hour and a half to do the next 4 minutes. So then it was just like, all right, let's just throw it out there. Let's go for it.
It's the 3 martinis that carried you, I think.
I'm sure I didn't have 3 martinis. I had, a beer or two maybe, but it was a long lunch. It was a long, nice lunch.
Well, before we jump into today, like 2023 for Cape and Cowl, I actually want to talk about your past, because I realized that I don't actually know Cape and Cowl's origin story and how long it's been going. Like, what is the origin story of Cape and Cowl Comics?
Sure. So it'll be 8 years for us in November.
Whoa, 50% nomination rate.
That's right.
Nice.
And you can't be nominated your first 2 years. And then we took the two first pandemic years off because we were a curbside shop, and they would have been kind of silly. Like, look at our plexiglass door covering. Look how great we are. So going way back, my first job when I was 12 years old was in a comic shop, working for store credit, filing back issues and buying quarter books with them. And then I kind of worked in and out of shops for a while, got out of comics entirely, realizing that though I really wanted to work in comics, I'm not a writer. I can't draw. I don't know what editors do. Like, making comics was not going to be an option for me. And maybe 10 or 12 years ago, I started this comic book club with a bunch of friends and friends of friends, and we would meet once a month and read books. And I was kind of the ringleader of this whole thing. And it dawned on me, it's like, what I can do? I actually can get people really excited about comics, and I can get people who aren't into comics excited about comics. So how do I do that as a job? Oh, I'm going to open a shop. Problem, I had $0 as a construction worker, very much paycheck to paycheck. And so it was kind of a pipe dream for a while until I worked my way up in construction to a higher level, where I actually got away from every single thing I liked about construction. So I was looking for a way out, but I had a little bit more means to actually think about doing something.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent a couple years grinding on like eBay, selling my personal collection, selling my massive action figure collection I had accumulated over 25 years, and just very slowly, $20 at a time, saving the money to open the shop. And then, I'm here in the Bay Area, and we have a lot of comic shops, the San Francisco Bay Area, and we've got a number of shops. We got a number of really good shops, but I knew that like Cape and Cowl, I wanted to be different. And I wanted it to be diverse and welcoming. And the obvious place to go here would be Oakland. And I've got history with Oakland personally. I spent a lot of time there, downtown in particular. I've played hockey down in downtown Oakland for 20 years. My store, actually, I can see the ice rink from my front door. And so I wanted to be somewhere where we could do comics with as many different people as possible, because I had worked in the very traditional shop with the very stereotypical customer before. And that's just not what I was trying to do. So yeah, so we ended up in downtown. We found a really great space on a corner, just off the beaten path. So when things kind of go off in town, which they can do sometimes, we are just removed from the action.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you went in, you knew you wanted to be different. You knew you wanted to reach a more diverse audience and be welcoming to a broader group of people. What did that mean for your product mix initially? Because I know you have a lot of local creators featured. I know at least when you did that last Eisner video, as soon as you go in, it's all ages. You have it seems like you have a very thoughtful approach to how you lay out your shop and what products you bring in because of that. How did that idea of being quote unquote different manifest in your product mix when you first started?
Yeah, I think originally, and it's still something that goes into every single order we place, it's representation. People want to see themselves in the stories that they enjoy. So it's just making sure when you set up a display that, and if it's in the kids section, any kid that walks by it says, hey, that looks like me, or that looks like my family, or that looks like a story that I'm familiar with from home. That is a big part of it. And then the product mix itself is I've always been a believer in let the customers dictate your product mix. Follow the customers' wants and desires. I knew that I wanted to be a graphic novel heavy shop. And we are, we do as much single issues as we do graphic novels, but we do quite a bit of both. I knew I wanted to hand somebody a story. Not necessarily sell them the first issue or sell them a cover first and foremost. Again, I had worked in that shop, a shop that had a very light graphic novel collection, and people would come in like, "Ooh, I want to read, I don't know, X-Men or Batman or something." We're like, oh, "Okay, let me take you to the shelf." Oh no, well, I can give you X-Men 36. And I can explain to you what happened in the 5 issues before it that got us here, but I kind of wish I could just hand you Grant Morrison Volume 1 and tell you this, you're in for a wild ride. Go get it.
Yeah. That's accessibility, right? You're trying to make it much more accessible. And I actually think it's kind of interesting because when you think about it, obviously I read single issues, this, but at the same time, it's if you're somebody who's new to comics, I think it's probably a lot easier to fall in love with a graphic novel just because you're reading something that resembles a complete story. And so you probably have, when you have newcomers coming in or people who are coming back to the medium, lapsed readers, you probably have a higher return rate when you put a graphic novel in their hands rather than just here's 3 single issues from Marvel.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it is a big part of being new reader friendly. It's just, and it's like a shopping experience that people are familiar with. You go to a bookstore and I want to find the nonfiction stuff, or I want to find the fantasy stuff, or I like horror. And that's why, we do our books by genre like that to make it easier for new people to find. They don't know that book X is published by Image or Dark Horse or whatever. They just want to look at all the creepy spines and the creepy face out books in the horror section and find one that calls out to them.
Yeah.
So we do assume, while still making sure not to alienate the people who have been in the comics mix for their whole lives, but still make it so when somebody comes in for the very first time, they're going to find something and they can find it comfortably,
Yeah. I'm going to be honest with you. I've been shopping in the same place since I was 6. And I still do not understand how their graphic novels are organized. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. And I personally subscribe to the idea that by genre, as much as you can go by genre, like to some degree, I don't know if DC and Marvel have their own sections for you or something like that, but it's like as much as you can go by genre, that makes it easier for newcomers. But has that always been the case? Were you by genre from day one?
No, we did start by publisher. And we do still have Marvel and DC as separate. Those are they are genres. I mean, they're superheroes, but the Marvel universe is a genre and the DC universe is a genre in my mind.
They're Coke and Pepsi.
They are, yeah. And people come in knowing if they're interested in superhero stuff these days, because it's such a part of just the collective understanding of pop culture, like they have a general idea that Deadpool is Marvel and Superman is DC for the most part. And if not, we are totally there to help them get there. For the first few years, we were by publisher.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it appeared like that was really detrimental to the smaller publishers.
Sure.
And really hard for new customers to shop. And as we grew and I couldn't greet every new person at the door and walk around with them, I was like, oh, I need this to be easier. Like this isn't super accessible when there's not somebody here to lead the way for you. If it takes us a couple minutes to fully engage with you, you got to be able to comfortably find something.
Well, and the shop expanded, what was it, 2021 by 1,000 feet?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot more ground to cover too, in terms of like hand selling people on anything. And also I know you have action figures, you have an array of other products. It's harder to guide everyone when you have so many products and more customers and so much more space. So making it easier for a person to find, help themselves certainly is going to make your job easier too.
Exactly.
I have a few questions about your process because there's two things you mentioned that I'm really interested in. You said that you were very good at selling people on like non-readers on comics and everything like that. What's your secret? Is there a secret path to selling?
Lots of smiling.
No, but I mean, it's like, do you have like, I know John Hendrick from Big Bang Comics, he has like questions he asks people whenever they're like, oh, I'm trying to find a comic and I don't know what to read. He's like, all right, what's your favorite TV show? What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite book or whatever? Like, do you have, is there like a recipe or is it all very like person by person?
Yeah, it's definitely person by person because like there are so many different personality types that come in, because there's the people who like desperately want to engage as soon as they come in. They want the full experience. They really want help. They really want to make sure they leave with the right thing. And then there's also the people who are like, oh my God, please don't talk to me. I just want to look in the bookstore. Leave me alone.
Yeah, you got to read body language, right?
Absolutely. And you can usually tell just from, hey, how's it going? Which type of person you're dealing with. So I don't have a script that I run down. It's often like, what kind of stories do you like? What kind of story are you looking for? What's the last thing that you read or watched that you were super into? And then here's just like, let's just go to these recommendation tables at the front and let me tell you about some of these ones as starting points. And then I can gauge your interest or disinterest in those. You hand somebody Something's Killing the Children Volume 1, and if they like cringe and like look at you as if you're a monster, you say, okay, let me show you Heartstopper instead. Let's change gears here. So it's really a matter of reading the person and trying, it's like a little getting to know you. It's a little first date at the recommendation table until we learn something about you. So
like every day is like 100 meet cutes for you?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just the most charming thing ever.
What type of customer do you think I am?
Just needy, just the kind that we just can't stop talking about after you leave.
Oh, you nailed it. That's exactly. They actually have a sign up like, don't talk to this guy. And it's just got my face on it.
You're the guy who's read a lot. So it's, have you read this one by that guy? Have you read this person has a new one out? If you don't know her, check it out. It's just like if you're into Fractions, Hawkeye, like let me take you over to
Casanova.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Sure. Oh, yeah. Oh, everyone should be recommended. Actually, no. I was going to say everyone should be recommended Casanova, but I don't know if I was a new comic reader, I'd probably feel overwhelmed by that book. It's great, but it's like almost like master's class comic level.
I think so. That's not the Fraction book I'm going to start you with. That's for sure.
Yeah.
You're definitely going to get Sex Criminals in your hands before we ever get to Casanova.
Yeah, absolutely. Good choice. Good call. I was actually recently told, I was talking to this one other customer who I'm very friendly with, and one of the people that work there told us that he wishes that we were around all the time because we're very pleasant. And I was like, I'm a pleasant customer. Yay.
Oh, how nice.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. It's Bad Idea, and Bad Idea is, once again, doing something? They're telling you that only you can save digital comics from Amazon, as the Renegade publisher is kickstarting a new digital comic from David and Maria Lapham, Scorpio Steele, Bill Crabtree, and Dave Sharp called The Ends. They're describing it as a quote-unquote comic book masterpiece, with the whole endeavor even coming with a pro edition featuring work from other creators. Wait, Bad Idea is doing digital? I thought that wasn't their thing. You might be wondering. You were correct. But apparently, you are no longer so. The Ends is coming to Kickstarter, but also digital at some point in the future. Sounds like a bad idea. It also sounds like Bad Idea. We'll see what it entails when it hits, but Bad Idea, doing its thing on Kickstarter once again. And now, back to the show. All right, well, let's get into where things are right now. I know the answer to this question because we recently talked for a feature that I wrote on Sketched, but listeners likely do not. How's the year going? I mean, beyond the fact you just won an Eisner Award, which definitely makes the year very good, but how has the year been going so far at Cape and Cowl from a sales standpoint?
Yeah, we're in the category of interesting. I find it interesting how our year has gone, because when answering your questions, which I love answering your questions because that's when I dig into my numbers. I'm not somebody who dwells on the numbers day to day. I think that would just be exhausting. So I went into digging into those numbers in early July or late June, so halfway through the year, expecting to be down by maybe 15% sales wise,
which is a lot.
Which would be concerning. And we would need to really evaluate what we're doing and how we're doing it and how we're affording to do it. But when I dug in the numbers, it wasn't that bad. We were down by 7%, I believe, which is like, that's respectable. And 2022 was a banner year for the industry, for our shop, for retail, I believe in general still. So it had to come down. But the feeling that I had was things were slow. And we didn't have a lot of great individual successes product-wise to hang our hat on. That would make me think, yeah, Marvel's been a little slow, but that new Miles Morales series is blowing the doors off, and that's really carrying the load for some from underperforming books. I can't point to anything that's done that. So yeah, I would say it's been interesting. The vibe has been weird, but the sales have been okay.
One of the things that I thought has been interesting about the last couple of years, where I feel like the recurring vibe is like, I'm succeeding, but I don't know why. And not just you. I mean, it's like, I remember Patrick Brower told me that, where he was, it just basically was like, we were down 2% and I have no idea how that is possible. And like down 2% is, I mean, like that's, I think something that people really need to keep in mind in this stuff is, and I put it in my article, but I don't know how much people really paid attention to it. Down from a record number is still pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
You're not complaining when it's like you are at like down 7% from your best year ever or something like that. It's one thing if that's the case. It'd be another thing if you were down below like 2019 numbers and you had really high costs and all this stuff like that. Your big problem right now is it seems, at least from the outside, it seems like you're down 7%, but it's like you don't really have an internal feel or a feel with your customers as to what's working or if anything is working really.
That's right. It's a very uneasy, only down 7%.
Right.
And I think you're spot on. Comparing it to last year doesn't mean a lot. Comparing it to 2019 is where things get interesting, and what I've been meaning to do and haven't. I know we're up from 2019. I know for sure we are. But are we working 10 times harder to be up? Absolutely. Like the day-to-day work that it takes to keep a shop open 7 days a week is a lot. it's constant.
Right. Well, I mean, that was what we were talking about before we started recording is like with the changes in like distribution and everything, it's now like you used to have a schedule where Monday would be FOC, Tuesday would be books come in, Wednesday would be new comic book day, Thursday, Friday, semi chill. And then like Saturday, Sunday would be when people come in because they're like out shopping and doing stuff. But now it's like all of a sudden Sunday you have to do another FOC because that's like with, you know, Lunar and Image moving over there and everything like that. You have like things are just spreading out. So it's like instead of having kind of focused days, now you kind of have everything spread across the entire week, which combined with all of like the things that are like in the weeds, like metadata and things like that, definitely makes it. I mean, it's more work spread out to more days.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, it used to be, as you said, Monday to Wednesday were the grind day, or not Wednesday. Wednesday's not a grind day, but Monday and Tuesday, get the work done so we can have a super fun Wednesday. And then we could just like kick our feet up Thursday through the weekend, do some fun stuff, make a silly video, refresh a display, do whatever we want. And now it's, man, there's not enough time between on Thursday, Friday, Saturday to get the stuff done to be ready for Sunday to start it all over again. And God forbid a retailer wanted a day off or a couple of days off. Like that's going to take some serious science and calculations and, you know, a personal assistant, because otherwise you're working every day.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to come back to this side of the equation, but I did want to discuss the good side. What's working? Are there specific products you can point to and say customers are responding to this? This is going pretty well. Things like that. Whether it's comics, graphic novels, whatever.
Yeah, we had a resurgence in graphic novels this year so far. We had become, really with the start of the pandemic, we had become more single issue heavy than we ever had before, which was just part of like the boom of collecting that happened starting in 2020. And it never felt super sustainable to me. It didn't feel like we were going to come back down to earth completely, but it never felt like, oh, we can just ride this single issue wave, this variant cover party, and we'll just ride it to retirement. There was always this feeling that like some of this extra money is going to dry up. Some of the excitement is going to dry up. Some of these collector part-time dealers are going to at some point realize they're selling books to each other and realize it's not the side hustle maybe they thought they were getting into. And then I was watching our graphic novel sales dip. And I didn't want to see that. That's just not how I wanted our store to be. Like we were talking about before, I want to be a store where people can come and get a story. And I love single issues. I read a ton of them. I have a garage full of them. I have a store full of them. I love single issue comics, but I didn't want to be purely a single issue comic store. So now this year we're back up to where I like to see our single issues and graphic novels, which are like dead even. Each of them account for about 40% of our overall sales. And I think that's perfect for us. So book sales are working. There's a few titles here and there. Dawn of DC has been nice. It's really invigorated the DC fan base and brought in some new people, you know, who are trying new things because of positive word of mouth. Marvel, I think Ultimate Invasion has done really well. Issue 2 came out this week and seems to be doing really well. So there's little bright spots. You know, Saga is performing, and Saga Volume 10 came out this year and has sold gangbusters. Brubaker and Phillips had a new book that's always going to be a huge hit in our store. You know, some of the Black Label books from DC, you know, Human Target, we sell the crap out of. Nightwing, you know, some of these really high quality books are doing really well for us.
I mean, it kind of seems like a lot of those books, besides like Dawn of DC, are kind of evergreen-ish type sellers, like the ones like Black Label in theory is supposed to be like an evergreen label. It's supposed to be one where it's like finite stories like Wonder Woman Historia or Wonder Woman Dead Earth or apparently I only can think of Wonder Woman books today, but collections like that. But then also Nightwing is one of those runs where I feel like that's going to sell for forever. Like you're going to be able to just work with that. And it is interesting though. Like I'm curious as to the graphic novel like leveling. Do you think that was in relation to product or in relation to that becoming a greater focus for you? Like, did you go out of your way to try to push that back up as much as you possibly can do such a thing?
It could have something to do with the store expansion. And now with this, we're 2,000 square feet now. And the vast majority of that is graphic novels. It's really interesting. One of the Eisner questions or there's a questionnaire where you break down your percentages of sales and then you break down those categories as square footage. And new comics, which account for 40% of our sales, are like 11% of the store or maybe 16% of the store, something like that. And graphic novels, which also are 40% of our sales, are like 65%.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. But I also think it gives the customer the feeling, the sense when they come in, like, oh, this is what I'm here to look at. This is what this store has, is just bookshelf after bookshelf after bookshelf of hopefully very well curated books for me to peruse. So I think that might have something to do with it. And it also might just have something to do with general shopping habits, where people are, now that they're in the shop more, they're walking these shelves more and picking up books as opposed to coming in, grabbing their single issues, walking the stands, getting out as quickly as they can, or shopping on our website and then just coming in, grabbing a bag and walking back out.
Well, the website part has been a big part for you, right?
It has. Yep. We're a comic hub shop. We switched to that point of sale system in March of 2020. It put our inventory online overnight and it changed us. We are changed.
Sounds very dramatic. I guess it is dramatic, but still.
It is. It was wild.
It was a full moon. All of a sudden, just Comic Hub just came alive.
I don't want to get down. I don't want to go on that journey in time back to, March to June 2020 when I was working alone in a store and like fielding speculator orders from our website and stuff of stock that we didn't even have. But we have like a really robust pre-order system. We do quite a bit of web sales every week for local customers who just happen to shop on our website before ever coming into the shop.
One of my favorite stories from any retailer is you told me that you had like a giant customer, like someone who buys a lot of stuff. And you're like, I wouldn't be able to recognize him if he walked in the shop because you've never met him. He only orders online.
Yeah, never once. Thank you, AJ. You're my guy.
I mean, that is the funny thing, though, is it's just like I'm a very big advocate for Comic Hub because the online store part makes it so easy. Like my shop, nothing but love for my shop. I've been like literally shopping there for 30 years. Well, 30 plus years. But if I want to change my pull list, I have to get them to print out one of those weird like printouts that have like the tear off things on the side. And then I have to like cross out stuff and then write the books on there. And I hope it happens and everything. And looking at Comic Hub, it's just so easy. And like, I'm kind of glad my shop doesn't have it because I'd probably buy more, which, is a dangerous proposition for someone such as myself.
Yes. People get themselves in trouble with Comic Hub for sure. When it's an app on your phone that you can be doing at 1:00 in the morning from your couch, you can get yourself in trouble ordering too much stuff. And we see that happen sometimes. And sometimes we have conversations with people say, we are concerned about your ordering habits. As much as we love them, there is a burnout on the horizon and we would like to avoid that. But we've leaned hard into it, particularly the pre-ordering. Like we need pre-order numbers. Like every shop in the world needs pre-order numbers. I don't care if they take the pre-orders or not. I say they need them to get numbers even remotely close to accurate. So we really leaned into, we have the system. This is how we need you to get your pre-orders in. And then just the shopping part, we get orders, again, all hours of the night from our regulars who are like, oh, I'm missing these 2 issues of World Tree. I got issue 1 and then I picked up issue 4, and where the hell are my 2 and 3? And they put in an order. And then by the time they come in on Wednesday for the rest of the stuff, we have those 2 issues for them. So it's great. It's awesome. Every store really should do it, even though it's kind of a pain in the ass. But every store should do it.
Would you mind? Okay, I'll just explain actually. So just to work off of what you were saying, for pre-orders, the reason why that's important is because the more you know about the books that customers want up front, the more confidently you can order for your shop, because you'll know that you have this baseline. Like, let's say there's like 30 pre-orders for World Tree number 5. And that means that at a minimum, you're going to order 30 copies there, and then also possibly have some for the shelf. And that will help dictate not only what you order to make sure everyone's covered, but also like overall interest in whether or not I should be ramping up my orders a little bit or something. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. And of course, more useful would be the pre-orders on World Tree number 1.
Right.
Than issue 5. Though we compare, what is the graph of these pre-orders? If we had 30 for issue 1, why are we down to 10 on issue 5? Has it been 10 since issue 2 and now we're at 10, 2 through 5? Or did we go from 30 to 25 to 15 to 10 to 10?
Right.
Which is really important information. But going in on an issue 1, particularly with like Marvel, who seems to have 5 new issue 1s a week sometimes
for the same series.
Yeah, sure. Like I need to know if people are legitimately interested in this. And if I'm only seeing a handful of pre-orders, I have to extrapolate from that people aren't super interested in my area. And if I look at, I can see which those, if it's 5 customers, I can look at who those 5 are. And if it's the 3 staffers that get every single X-Men book and my 2 diehards, like, okay, well that doesn't even tell me anything. And the truth is, as stores kind of mature a little bit, as we are around a little longer, we get a little more comfortable with this idea that we might not have everything for everybody all the time, and that we will try and get it for you if we don't have it. But I'm not going to live in fear of not having the right variant cover on the stands for somebody who might come in and grab it. And I'm not going to live in fear of not having enough. As a recent example, Hot Girl number 1, underordered, didn't have enough. And I'm okay with that because I also knew I didn't want to look in my overstock boxes next year and have 40 extra copies of Hot Girl number 1 if it didn't hit. So yeah, pre-order.
Yeah, the same is true. I mean, it's not pre-orders, but the same is true to some degree for like graphic novels, where it's like that is a very large sea to fish from, and you cannot have all the fish in that sea. I mean, just think about manga alone. It's like my favorite manga series is 20th Century Boys, and that's like 24 volumes. And so it's like most shops, if you're going to have 20th Century Boys whatsoever, would have the first volume and probably the most recent volume. Because you want to make sure that, like, well, if it's still coming out, those are the things you always have. But are you always going to have volume 7? Are you always going to have volume 15? Probably not, because odds are somebody is not going to randomly come in and just like buy the whole series, and you would just be stuck with inventory you'd have to have on your shelf. And real estate, I know, is a really big part of it. Is like shelf space is something that you always have to really factor into your product mix or how you order product, because you can't shelve everything.
Yeah, exactly. There's most shops are out of room. We're out of room. We expanded our store. We doubled the size of the store, instantly out of space. I have no idea. We didn't even like add a whole bunch of stuff. We just took our stuff out and put it out on the shelves, and then there's like no shelves left. I'm like, how did that happen? So yeah, we have to be super, super selective. And you have to be comfortable with the idea that you're not going to have the book for everybody. You probably have a book for everybody. It's not guaranteed to be the specific random volume 7 of 20th Century Boys that they initially came in for.
Right.
But we'll find something else.
I have to ask. So you have the ability for people to immediately act and order off of Comic Hub. They can get whatever books you have in stock, they can order from. Did you see any uptick from the Eisner win? Were people like on your site being like, I got to get that Cape and Cowl Comics stuff?
I don't know about that, but like our Wednesday was huge this week. It was like a double Wednesday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a monster day. It was so much fun. It was so busy, and definitely a lot of people coming in to congratulate and kind of enjoy the excitement of it together. To tell us where they were when they found out the news. It led to sales that day for sure. I don't know if we've gotten more out of town sales yet because people have heard of us, but that's something to keep an eye on.
I wore my Cape and Cowl shirt the day after you won. I wore it golfing, and it was funny because like I kept having people be like, "Oakland," you're like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "It's a comic shop," and they're like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "Oh my god."
That's so funny. That was great. I saw that picture and that was awesome. And that's something I heard from at least three people on Wednesday is like they were in a group of people and they got the news that we won and like some of them started crying or some like jumped up in excitement and the people around them are like, "What is wrong with you?" And then they tell them like, "Oh my God, my comic book store won this giant award." And they're like, "So what?"
It means a lot, man. Come on. Okay, one other thing involving successes. I'm kind of curious, do you have one comic that's been a success for you that you think might surprise people? Because I'm always interested in like every shop is reflective of their owners and their employees. And so certain books pop. Like my one I always lean on is Challenger's Comics and Conversation in Chicago was always like a monster seller of the Six Gun. It was like a big thing for them. And it was not a monster seller for most. Do you have something that fits that right now?
There was a stretch and it slowed down, but Jeff Lemire, Matt Kent, and David Rubin did a
Cosmic
Kickstarter
Detective.
book, Cosmic Detective. And I backed the Kickstarter at a retailer level. We got like 5 copies. I read mine right away, did a Instagram post or something that was like, holy shit, look at this book. It's so great. Like everything about this book is so great. And we sold those 5 copies that day. And I reached out to Matt Kent, who was really nice to respond because I've never met Matt Kent. And I was like, I need more of those books. And he sent me 20 copies of the book. And I made a post. And I was like, we got 20 more copies. Those sold out over the weekend. So I reached out again. I was like, I need 50 copies of that book. And they sent us that. And there was a time where that book that hasn't even been released to the general population
yet. September from Image?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was like our hottest seller.
Well, you were like probably the only shop in the area, a very highly populated area that probably had it.
I think so. Yeah, probably.
And it's Matt Kent and Jeff Lemire and David Rubin. It's like,
yeah,
that's a pretty big team.
It's a pretty easy sell.
It's a good book. Rubin is amazing. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
It is.
Before we go on to the other side, I did want to ask, you have your first ever Cape and Cowl Con coming in August. Retailers are famously busy to begin with. Why did you want to put together your own convention, especially one that's housed off-site at a brewery? Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. I'm a glutton for punishment, I suppose. Or I just can't let a halfway fun idea die. I have to try and see if it's actually fun or not.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be fun. We were invited to this brewery for a drag show, a Halloween drag show. To just set up a table of spooky comics in the corner. And I'm sitting there behind this table watching some really excellent drag performers and looking at this space that we're in with like, we could fit, I don't know, 40 tables in here. We could have a little Comic-Con here. And then, found out that the space behind it could be used too, which is like this big parking lot. So we could add another 25 tables out there. And one of our really good customers, one of my favorite customers, manages the event space. And so we started talking about it and they were super into the idea. And it was just a matter of finding a date on the calendar to try it, getting a sweet logo design, and then putting it out there and giving ourselves all of like 2 months to put an entire convention together.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it just kind of sounded fun. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think that stuff is great. My shop just had a Not at Comic-Con event where every year they just, the same day as, well, the Saturday of San Diego Comic-Con, they always have like their own thing there. And it was a lot of fun. They had some local artists. They had some people like selling comics and selling varying other things. And it just had a great vibe to it. And sometimes, especially in a market that's really, there's a lot of shops in your area. Like, you need to do something to stand out. And part of that is, like, you differentiate yourself in the way that you did. But also, it's like, if you're the one that has a cool event where it's got, like, Ramon Villalobos and Justin Greenwood and Maria Wolf, you know, like, all there, like, doing stuff. I mean, those are people would be thrilled to see at, not to demean your event, but, you know, a proper Comic-Con. Like, if you went to, like, Emerald City Comic-Con and you saw those three there, you'd be stoked. But instead, it's just at this brewery where you can get a beer and get Ramon to do an amazing sketch for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know, it's funny because as I started reaching out to people, and these are just our friends ultimately, you know, some are local or some we've become friendly with for various reasons. And I'm looking at this list, I'm like, wow, this is turning into like a roster of very cool, exciting guests. You know, this is an event I would want to go to if I weren't doing it on my own. It's about community. It's just about doing something, you know, for the people who support us. This is not an event that's going to make us any money. It's going to cost us a whole lot of money, you know, at least immediately, but maybe down the road, somebody is going to have wandered into this brewery on a Sunday and discovered us and said, wow, those guys showed me a really great time. Where are they? Like, let's go find the shop.
That's the beautiful thing, too, is like if you just go there to get a pint, you're just like, what? What is this? Yeah. I'm going to check this out. Next thing you know, you get like Cosmic Detective and you're a comic book fan. Who knew?
Exactly.
Okay, flip side. We've talked a bit about this, and at least in terms of like the time cost and like kind of what's not working in that regard. But has there been anything that's kind of stood out as not working right now in terms of like product or anything like that?
Yeah, there's a little bit of growing concern around Marvel Comics. You know, as much as I'd like to think of us as a diverse store in terms of what we carry and the publishers and creators that we support, Marvel is still a big piece of the pie. I'm uneasy with where Marvel is right now in terms of sales and the books that they're putting out. You know, I have a pretty good sense for when a new Marvel series starts of how many we're going to sell of issue 1. I have not a clue what we will sell of issue 2. Doesn't matter how many we sell of issue 1. It doesn't matter how hyped the staff is, how many customers seem to be into it. I cannot guess what we sell on a second issue, and that's an uneasy feeling.
Is that across the board? Like Avengers, like the new Jed MacKay and CF Via book. Is that even included? Something like that, like a big book?
Sure. Yeah. We sold a lot of Avengers #1. We really came down to earth with issue 2. And with issue 3, we are above where the last Avengers series ended, but not by a lot. You know, not what our sales of issue 1 would have led you to expect. You know, that with issue 1 selling somewhere in the realm of 75 to 100 copies, let's say, I would expect 50 people to come back for issue 2. But I think maybe 40 did. And then when issue 3 came, I think maybe we're looking at like 35 copies sold. So what happened to those other 40 people? And of course, some people bought variant covers and things, and that skews it. But why aren't people coming back? Because that Avengers book is good. I like that Avengers book.
Yeah, it's really solid.
I like Jed MacKay. I think the art is fantastic. I think the team is fun. The staff liked it. I liked it. Like, why aren't we selling more?
I'm not gonna lie, I've had to eat a lot of crow lately about Jed MacKay. I remember when he was announced for Avengers. I think I even talked to you for this, where I was like, does Jed MacKay sell? Like, I don't understand why he's doing Avengers. And then I read Doctor Strange. I was like, man, this book is really good. And then I read Avengers. I'm like, this is really solid too. Like, what's going on here? I think I owe Jed MacKay an apology.
I felt the same way. I mean, I on a whim grabbed Black Cat Volume 1 maybe 6 months ago and was blown away. That book was so much fun.
Yeah.
You know, it really reminded me of, I'm a big Catwoman guy, and it really reminded me of the fun old Catwoman books I used to enjoy. And then I read his Mary Jane Black Cat, and I was like, this is amazing. Give this guy every book. I'm so into it. And I read his Doctor Strange, and I don't like Doctor Strange. I don't like magic in comics. And I was like, I like this book too.
The first issue is so charming. It is crazy.
It is.
And I will say, I did actually read, I think Nick Lowe actually sent me the first issue of Black Cat. And I was like, God, this is actually really good. And then I completely forgot to keep reading it. And I've heard nothing but good things.
Oh, yeah.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. Summer is in full swing and things are getting hot on Zoop. August is the time for mini launches, including, ironically enough, the book called August by Benjamin Morse, also an anthology from Stack Deck Press, Tony Gregori's Pork Chop Robot Killer, and the end of Glenn Bray's scrapbook campaign. And around the corner in September is Howard Chaykin's first foray into crowdfunding. There's so much more on the horizon, so stay tuned for updates. It takes less than 30 seconds to sign up for Zoop, and the e-commerce style checkout is easy and intuitive. Add multiple rewards and add-ons into your cart, provide some info during checkout, and you're done. No confusing additional steps in finalizing your pledge, and no post-campaign surveys. And of course, the creators appreciate your support. For creators looking to crowdfund your project, Zoop is currently open for submissions. Email them at hello@wearezoop.com to start a campaign. And now, back to the show. It is interesting, though, because, like, I think this is something you've shared with me. Like, one of the things that I've heard from a lot of shops is that smaller publishers have been a challenge lately. And you've seen, like, that drop off really bad, where it's like, even if you sell some of number one, like, most books are gone. Like, I had one shop tell me they're gone by number 4 for sure. And then other shops tell me, like, it doesn't even last that long. It's like they're gone by 2. Like, they're just gone. But the interesting thing is like, a number of shops suggested that Marvel is even at that level, where it's just like the day of that Marvel all customer is gone, or the day of them staying loyal to like a new book is just like, if they're not completely hooked, they're gone. And it's interesting to see that same idea of like the smaller publishers even carrying up to the very top of the pile.
Yeah, we do good Marvel business. So I don't think we have any Marvel titles that are like subscriber only or anything like that, which we have
Sure
a large number of small press books that don't hit the shelves. Sadly, I hate that they don't. It becomes really painful to put 9 unsold copies out of 10 back into your overstock after nobody bought a copy off the shelf, and just that one person who pre-ordered it. Marvel has some books that are certainly pretty close, though. You know, I do think that Marvel benefits from inertia more than any other publisher. I think that we see people ride it out on Marvel books that don't deserve people's business. No, I'm sorry, because I know it's somebody's passion project and that's a shitty thing to say, but there are books that people could be spending their hard-earned $4 or $5 on and enjoy more. But Marvel, more so than anybody else, has just their claws in people, you know. And I have Marvel books I'm going to read no matter what. Like, you know, and so I'm part of it. And I have way more DC books that I'm going to read no matter what. But DC doesn't benefit from the same thing, and the indies absolutely don't benefit from that same inertia.
I just have to tell, I'm not going to say what book it was, but my all-time most intense cut I've ever made is I read 11 issues of a 12-issue Marvel Maxi series, and I dropped it with issue 12. I was like, you know what? I don't even want to read this. I'm done. I'm like, I've come this far. I remember telling Oliver Sava, the comics critic, about that, and he thought I was an insane person for doing that. I was just like, I can't do it anymore, man. It's just like, it's not worth it to me. But do you think you've seen, since you opened, a change in consumer behavior in terms of how they engage with single issues? Like, do you think that part of this is not publisher based and part of it is based off of how your customers behave? Or where do you think the line is drawn between those two sides? Because it does seem like single issues are kind of like the kind of problem right now, which is kind of a wild thing to say about the direct market, in which they're also the backbone of the industry.
You know, the emergence or resurgence of the collector has changed everything about single issues. You know, when we opened 8 years ago, we were not a collector store for new releases. You know, I have always done back issues, and we've always had wall books, and we started doing graded comics early on. But off the stand stuff, I never noticed speculation or real pickiness. I truly had no idea what a spine tick was until like a year into owning the store.
That sounds like a medical condition when you have like bed bugs or something.
It's spine tick on the edge of the book when there's like a little mark that like breaks the color.
Somebody called that I sold a couple of comics recently. They called it a color break. I'd never heard that term either.
That is a color breaking spine tick as opposed to a non-color breaking spine tick. I had never heard that before. I had never cared. Going back and looking at my old comics, ticky as hell. Never considered it. And now, people pick up the entire pile of Doctor Strange #5 and they perfect egg, from Clerks.
Yeah.
The guy trying to find the perfect egg.
The milkmaid.
Yeah. I mean, and they are looking for the perfect issue of every single book they get off the stands. So the collector market is probably part of why we see these massive drop-offs between issues, because they want this first appearance or this first issue or this hot cover that they put on in issue 1. That's the biggest factor that differentiates today's single issue comic sales to, a few years back.
Yeah. The interesting thing is, like, this is an impossible conundrum because shops can't change this because they don't want to get burned by having too much inventory, but publishers won't change it because they won't, most of them, particularly Marvel, won't do returnability. But the interesting thing is like, sometimes I wonder if there's a chicken and the egg situation to some of this, where it's like, when I was a kid, I would go in and I could buy, like, let's say X-Men #5 from the 1991 series, like with Jim Lee and all that stuff. I could buy that. And if I didn't buy it then, I could come back like 2 weeks later and it would still be there because they ordered enough for like forever, basically. And now it's like, there's so many comics, you really got to order like subs only for a lot of these books, because otherwise you're just going to be stuck with it. And it's like a really fine line. Like, I think Jermaine Exum from Acme Comics put it to me, like, basically there's two different ways you get burned. You either order too much, so you swallow that inventory and you take the cost in that way, or you order too little and you can't sell enough, or you don't sell to all the people that would have bought it from you otherwise, like with Hot Girl, like you were mentioning earlier. And like, that's such a conundrum, because you're kind of like, you as in retailers are kind of caught in this position where you can't aim to grow, because otherwise you're going to slowly like paper cut yourself to death.
Absolutely. It's so hard, and it's heartbreaking in a lot of ways. I just did my Diamond initial order last night. I was super late. It was due at midnight. I turned it in at 11:45. And I'm looking at all these books that from small publishers. They look cool, and I have nobody pre-ordering them, and I'm just on to the next thing. I have to protect us
and your employees
from unsold comics. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't benefit anybody other than that publisher who gets our, 10 copy order or something. It's just, there's no benefit for us to take a chance without a safety net. And unfortunately, the safety net, from what I understand, the safety net of returnability doesn't always accomplish a publisher's goal of increasing orders, which I find mind-boggling. It increases every order for me, always. Even on Vault Comics did returnability on every single book for a long time, and I think they've slowly stepping back from that on doing it for every single book. And even when we're on issue 5 of a series that's not selling a lot of copies, I'm ordering extra copies to make sure I have them on the shelf, and to make sure I have a copy in the back issue bins, a single copy, but a copy in the back issue bin. So if somebody comes in, sees the cover for issue 5, here's another customer and our employee talking about it, they have the opportunity to maybe go back and read that story. And then unfortunately, from what I understand, there's a very, very small group of retailers horribly abusing returnability. Ordering
1,000 copies,
massive amounts of books, to get, particular incentive covers, and then returning 90%, and basically ruining it for everybody else.
Didn't they like briefly get rid of the ability to do that? Like, you could only have one or the other or something like that?
Diamond tried to say you could have returnability, but you couldn't have incentive covers.
Right.
Which makes sense.
It does make sense.
It makes sense, but it wasn't popular. At the time, nobody liked it. It was the wrong time for Diamond to be doing that kind of thing, frankly. It was a couple of years ago. Diamond was not very popular, and they came in and made a rule that was not popular.
Yeah.
And from a couple of publishers I talked to, they didn't love it either, because it did hurt their orders. Because when they put a 1 in 100 on it, a lot of stores would order 100. The problem is the stores that order 1,000.
Right.
Or the stores who don't care and order 5 anyway, which is, I don't understand either extreme. I don't get it. Let's all be cool, and then everybody can be cool.
Yeah, it's like behave responsibly and we'll all have nice things. The problem is nobody likes behaving responsibly. All right, just a few more questions. I'm going to give you a very interesting challenge. Let's say you're running comics. You are now the president of comics. You won an Eisner Award, so now you're president of comics.
Yeah.
Or, excuse me, president of the direct market. As much as anyone can ever be the president of the direct market, what's the first thing you do to make retailer lives easier? You can only do one thing. It's a big menu to choose from.
It's full returnability. That's it. Full returnability on everything. I'll even take it on just single issues. I can work around the clock. I can do 3 FOCs a week and 3 initial orders and 3 to 10 restock orders a week for books. I can do all that, but take some of my stress out of it. Give me the opportunity to stock new and interesting and risky things
with confidence,
and I will be a much happier retailer.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that like the idea of a bad apple spoiling the bunch in that regard, given the fact that like, it seems like it'd be really easy to pick those people out and like, maybe like talk to them or have sanctions or something like that. I don't know. I'm trying to pretend like this situation is probably much easier than it actually is, but it is really unfortunate because most of the shops I know, it's like, it's kind of like with incentive variants. Like I've talked to shops where it's like there's a 1 in 100. And if you're ordering 80, you're like, all right, I'll order 20 more so I can get that variant. But if you're only ordering 30, you're not going to order 70 more copies because that's the rational move to do. Where things get a little wonky is when people stop behaving rationally and start thinking like, how can I maximize this for myself and just like hose everyone else in the process? But all right, another thing I want to bring up was, one thing I really like talking to you, or one reason why I really like talking to you is because you're just generally a pretty happy guy. Like even as we're talking about some negative things, you're a very positive person. And that's even the case when you're talking about like fantasy baseball or the Red Sox or whatever. That makes a big difference, I feel. And I think that's part of the vibe of your shop is you're trying to be welcoming, you're trying to be inclusive, and you're trying to be open to people. How do you stay positive? It's a tough job. Like what's your secret? Is it the 2-beer lunch?
Daily 2-beer lunch, and let's not get started on breakfast because that'll scare people. No, it's comics. It's still comics. It's still the best job in the world, even when it's not. It's a whole lot better than digging ditches. I've dug ditches. It's a whole lot better than telling people to dig ditches. I've done that too.
You preferred the digging ditches to the telling people to dig ditches too, it sounds like.
Oh, I'd much rather dig the ditch. Oh my God. Oh my God, give me a shovel, please. But I was bad at it. That's why I had to get out of it.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I like comics. I like people. I do. It's like not a cool kid thing to say, but I like people. I like talking to them and knowing what they're about. I stay positive because it's more fun than not being positive. I like what I do. I like the people that I get to deal with. And it could just be so much worse. And like, actually, we've seen so much worse. We've seen so much worse in the last handful of years. So try and knock this smile off my face. I dare you.
Okay. Another thing I wanted to bring up is I got to find a picture of it so I can actually quote it. I guess I don't really need to, but somewhere I came across a sign that was in front of your shop that said, I believe all comics are better than all movies and all TV shows. Is this a thing that once existed?
It's if you look at Twitter, I think it's been our pinned tweet on Twitter for
that's it
5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah.
And it just says all comics are better than all movies.
Okay.
And that's a fact.
Oh, okay. So there was 2 thoughts I had. One, you actually believe that, and fair enough. It's your job. You do that. The other thing is you want people to come in Like, it's literally like that debate me meme where it's like you want people to come in because if they come in to be like, I don't believe this is true, you're like, really? Have you tried Casanova?
Sure, there's some element, I remember that pretty well, actually, because we had just gotten the sandwich board built. One of my staff members built it and he brought it in. And I was like, I have no plan for this thing. I just know that I need to go put it on the sidewalk and it's blank. So I gotta put something on it. Like what's a bold statement? And something I do believe. You can take movies away from me. I don't care. Take your movies. But I need comics. I need, you can't have those.
The funny thing about that is I'm guilty of doing things like that all the time. Like literally right outside here, like the Bed Bath and Beyond was closing and they had like this massive sale. So my wife and I were like, what can we get there? And I'm like, I'm going to get this pushpin board and I'm going to get this other board. And I'm like, I don't even know where to put it. I don't have room. I mean, like you can see my walls, like there's art everywhere. And it's just, I'm out of space, but I have it now. And so at some point I will have to do something with it. Sometimes you want to get something and then figure it out later.
Exactly. And I recommend putting something bold on there.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to. Actually, tying into the last question I have for you is you mentioned like you can't take away your comics. That is actually false for you. When you said in the beginning that when you were putting this shop together, you wanted to build your bankroll and everything. So you sold at least part of your collection. I'm curious, like, have you rebuilt your favorites? Is that something you've done over the time? Or has it become a point where you're just like, I have enough comics because I own this entire shop?
Okay. The sad truth to answer that question is that my favorites are like the unsellable ones that are still in my garage. Because I'm a child of the 90s and I started reading comics with the death of Superman.
Mm-hmm.
And I love 90s DC comics.
Oh, yeah.
And there's no market for those at all.
That's because people have terrible taste.
Exactly. Thank you. If I gave those away, people would look at me disappointed. So those are still in there. I did sell, I do look at the store as my collection, as ever changing. I do have books that I have as a personal collection. It's so funny because, there was this joke in the past, maybe it still is, of people who like thought that their comic collection is going to pay for their kids' college. But I actually have comics like in a safe that I intend to pay for my kids' college with.
I'm guessing they're not 90s DC comics.
Those aren't the 90s DC. Those are something else. When we buy a collection, sometimes there'll be a really, really good book in it. And the goal will be, can I keep that book and still make money for the store selling everything else?
Yeah.
So I do have a bunch of books like that. And I have weird oddball books. I have like weirdly and kind of shamefully, I have like 2 comics on display in the store or on display in my house. My favorite cover kind of ever is this old Justice League of America cover where they're at the circus or something and they're looking in a funhouse mirror and the reflection, the funhouse mirror is all distorted, but them looking in the mirror is equally distorted.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like Wonder Woman's super skinny and tall and Green Arrow is like 2 feet tall in like a box. And I just, I always loved that. That was the book that was like in the display case at my childhood store that I like aspired to.
Yeah.
And never got. And then I have do you remember that there was a book called Elseworlds 80-page Giant that came out in the 90s?
Yeah.
And it got recalled and pulped because a baby crawled into a microwave.
Oh, in the comic, not in life. Yes.
Probably, but that's not why the comic was recalled. Yeah, in the comic, the baby goes in the microwave, and I guess DC got freaked out and they recalled it, but some copies got out, and I have one, and that one is also on display in my house.
I mean, that's the funny thing. So I have typically every summer I have a comic book garage sale where I sell my own books because I'm constantly trying to cull the herd and just focus on my favorites. And I think people would be surprised if they like look through my collection of the ones that I really want to keep. It's like random books like Tom Payer and Rags Morales' Android Hourman series from like the late 90s, early 2000s. Love that book. I mean, 90s stuff, it's just like you could not take Mark Waid and Humberto Ramos's Impulse run from me. like for any amount. Well,
Thank you.
I was going to say for any amount of money, but it would be, I would have a price because then I could just buy it again pretty cheap. But it's like, those are the books that really you connected with more than like, I don't know, something that's more valuable. It's like that stuff can be a lot more meaningful to you. It's like, I love Emerald Twilight, the Green Lantern story from the 90s. And it has nothing to do with the fact that it's an important story. It was the first Green Lantern comic I ever read. And I'm like, this comic is insane.
It is also the best Green Lantern story ever.
It's really good.
So I back you up on that any day of the week. But yeah, I mean, it's, I love the Superboy series from the 90s and the Tim Drake Robin series.
Tom Grummett?
Yeah, Tom Grummett.
Yeah, Tom Grummett was good on that book. He was killing it.
So good. Yeah. Steel. I had one letter published in a comic ever. And I wrote into Steel when Christopher Priest was writing it. And I think Dennis McCowan was doing the art. And I wrote a letter to complain because they changed his suit. I liked the classic suit with the Superman symbol and the red cape and his face, fully metal. And he was still like very muscly, even though it was all metal. And they changed it to something to like rightfully show his face and who he was and all these things. But I was like, I sent some letters saying like, this series has really gone downhill since you guys changed his costume. But I think you're starting to get it back up or some obnoxious thing that they did not need to hear from a 13-year-old while trying to do their job.
I do think that like, all of this is part of the reason why I would say I love movies, so I cannot fully agree with your sandwich board A-frame thing. But I will say this. The beauty of comics is any comic can be anyone's favorite. And like, I don't like for movies, it's like generally speaking, there's like consensus on favorites. If I told somebody that like my favorite comic ever was like, I don't know, Kaiju Max. I mean, I'm just going to choose Kaiju Max because that's legitimately on the table. People would be like, really? Like, I don't even know what that comic is. I'm like, you should. And there's always somebody else that can be introduced to like a deep cut comic that you really, really love.
100%. Yeah. And there's so many. I mean, I know there's a lot of movies, but holy shit, there's a lot of comics. And we cover everything. Like there's truly something for everybody. Like everybody could have a favorite comic if they find the right one. And maybe you could say that for movies, but who cares? Who even cares?
These are the words of an Eisner winner right there. This is why you won. I assume that you had basically these exact quotes in your like 80-page giant document that you sent in, but that is actually all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on, talk about your big win, Cape and Cowl Comics, and everything else. I appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much. My absolute pleasure. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with retailer Eitan Manhoff. You can find him in his shop, Oakland's Cape and Cowl Comics, and the shop itself on its website and on social media. Big thanks to Deanna Chapman for editing this podcast. If it sounds better than usual, it's because of her. Love Off Panel, want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts today and give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel. And when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast, as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my subscription comic site, Sketched, at sketch.com for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by following on Twitter and Instagram at SketchComic, or following me at @SliceFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Christina Merkler, Andrew Lehman, Cancel Comics, Scott Place, Darcy Van Polges, Kevin Bides, Travis Schmeiser, Tom Evans, Natalie Mockery, Reed Beeman, Kelly Sudconic, Max Wood, Jeremy Lambert, Brian, Matteo Ciccati, Chris Doré, Nir Levy, Dennis Hoffman, Jason Hussa, Kieran Gillen, Jonathan Kent Uratam, Henry Johnson, Jingo Boren, James Tynan IV, Chris Langford, Jason Wood, Tom Peachy, Ben Damstead, Rom V, Nick Walker, Patrick Coyle, Isaac Oren, Scott Carpenter, Rent Narb Studios Comics, Capes and Tights Podcast, Klaus Van de Ven, Brian, Subman Industries, Jack Mulqueen, Kyle, Carl Kerschel, Robert Masellic, Elza Chartier, Luke Nakashoji, Dr. Luke, Scott Hazelwood, Canadian by Proxy, Bradley Rader, Carl Choi, Brandon DePillis, Patrick Brower, Declan Shelby, Dan Garino, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, Nick Bennett, Birdcage Comics Cafe, Susanna Polo, Reed Hinkley Barnes, Mario Tiambang, Andrew Carita, Matt Mahoney, Stephen Hall, Philip Myrick, Chris Bachala, Torin Grunbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Waltz Comics and Books, Akil Wilson, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Julia Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Reinwan, Vita Ayala, Akil, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, David Kelly, Nick Polito, Matt Matthew Groom, Jason Massey, Adam Bogart, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Ian Maxwell, Cliff Chang, Carl McMahon, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Adam Highfield, Fiona Stables, Mark Abnett, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Wolfpack for letting me use their song Outro as the show's opening theme, and Top Rank T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's outro and ad music just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.